Good.
Okay.
Okay.
Wonderful.
All right. Thanks. So I'll just kick off. So, hello everybody. Welcome to my little talk today. So, au revoir is my nice little rhyme that says goodbye to the OR segment that I tentatively reconstructed for proto-Austroasiatic that I presented last year. In fact, in addition to that, I'm also going to call into question the diphthong in proto-Austroasiatic that has figured in most reconstruction. So I'll just kick along. And the subtitle, the moins c'est plus, less is more, is the theoretical point I'm going to touch upon. It's quite easy to explain things in reconstruction by positing more and more new segments for every new correspondence one finds. I know I've done it myself in the past. For example, in recent years, I presented ideas for new onset consonants in proto-Austroasiatic, a laminal fricative, an alveolar affricate, a palatal implosive. But these things are always under reconsideration, and it's always my intention to try to account for things with as fewer segmental reconstructions as possible. I always think that, as I say, less is more. Anyway, we're talking about the vowels today, and so with help from Mark Alves, over the past year, the comparative lexicon that we published has been expanded from 500 to 600 units, which hopefully we'll be able to present by the end of this year, more or less. And also this time presented accompanied by reflexes in up to 14 branches, not the very abbreviated presentation we made last year. One of the issues you'll remember is that we presented this table of proto-vowels. Now, some of these are clearly uncontroversial. We'd all agree without any hesitation that there was a proto-long E, a long U, or a long R, and we have no trouble abstracting these and presenting them. We can also reasonably disagree about what the phonetics might have been in different positions or registral states, etc. But we can agree that we can abstract these and we can readily allocate correspondences to them. But the idea of a proto inventory of vowels is by itself perhaps too abstract, because it doesn't tell us about things like frequencies, phonotactics, registers, etc. But you'll notice that in the inventory, there's a couple of bracketed items. So we have the bracketed air and the OR. And I mentioned last year, I bracketed the air because I thought that it might have been an allophone of the ear diphthong. Since then, adding more items to the proto-Austroasiatic set, I now think that the ear and the air were contrastive in some environments, but maybe not contrastive in all environments. So I'm keeping them in the system for the moment. One of the problems is that these are sounds that I think are very apt to fall together in some languages, and so this can complicate the interpretation of their contrastive status. Well, a similar problem presented itself in the analysis of the long open R sound in Austroasiatic. Now, to begin with, for a long time, I just assumed that there would be plenty of open R words in proto-Austroasiatic. Sorry, my voice is going very quickly because I have quite a sore throat, but I'll push on. And I thought that it wouldn't be too hard to sort of line up the correspondences and reconstruct the R words. But it turned out in the course of compiling the lexicon that a lot of the words in Austroasiatic that have an R vowel are borrowed, and those that can be excluded from borrowing, that we can give some reasonable estimate of time depth to, are often very spotty. They're missing reflexes in many branches, and it's very difficult to put together full sets of etymologies, or at least usefully full sets. There's also a problem that the R vowel has a habit very often of breaking into diphthongs in various contexts, in various branches. And again, this greatly complicates the analysis. And also there are many cases where we've put together etymologies, but it's quite ambiguous what they point back to. And this could be due to things like expressive variation, undiagnosed registral features, or other things that these are the normal problems we find in this reconstruction at great time depth. Well, the starting point I take is that, like ER and U, there was uncontroversially a long R vowel in proto-Austroasiatic. And I assumed that there would be correspondences where it would be no trouble identifying reflexes of this. So I did manage to assemble about 40 cognate sets that I reckon supported a proto-long open O sound in proto-Austroasiatic. Of these 40 or so, maybe 10 have reflexes in Nicobarese, and you can see these in the two tables here. I hope it's big enough for you to see those examples. Now, in the top table, you see there's 5 examples where pretty much the reflexes are generally R, and I would say they unambiguously should be aligned with proto-Austroasiatic R. But in the bottom table, you can see there's another 5 examples in Nicobarese where the reflex is a diphthong, is an OR, OR, that kind of thing. And then this poses the question, how to analyze? Is it different correspondence, or is it, are they in complementary distribution, or what? You'll also notice that there's some variation in the Khmer reflexes as well, but Khmer has a very highly restructured vowel system, and so I'm fairly relaxed about that variation in Khmer, although there is an issue we will come to in a moment. Also, I've disregarded 6 branches in the presentation here just to make it a bit simpler today, but these are the best represented branches, so I think it's fair enough. You'll notice that half the cells are unfilled. This is how difficult it is to find, complete etymologies for these sounds. But you'll notice in this second table where we have the diphthong reflexes in Nicobarese, these include very important etymologies like the word for child, the house fly. There's also these words emerge. There's also a form of the verb to fell a tree. And I dealt with this last year by positing this OR diphthong as a kind of placeholder rather than a very strong phonological claim. And I said that, look, I suspect these are allophones of the long R, but I'm not sure what to do. I have to mark these as such for the time being. But in the meantime, I've gone back and reassessed these OR cases, and I've looked again at my Nicobarese reconstruction, and I found that in 4 of these 5 cases, my Nicobarese reconstruction actually suggests an U vowel, the high long back vowel, not R, but U. And in a couple of cases, the Khmer data is also consistent with an U for these words, although the Khmer is ambiguous. Because of its restructuring, it can point it can point either way. But reflecting upon this, I've come to the view that it's better to just posit variants in proto-Austroasiatic for now, to just posit A and U variants, rather than try to posit an additional new phoneme, because we know there are all sorts of motivations in Austroasiatic languages for vowel variation, and so it may well be that there were U variants, or it could be we just have an unsolved problem here. That's fine. Let's look at more data when it comes in. And in fact, very recently, I got some more Nicobarese data from Anvita Abi, who I must thank for that. And so I will be recompiling the Nicobarese and looking to see if there is something more to this. And I'm quite sympathetic to the idea that there might have been a register distinction in the Nicobarese high vowels. And so I'll be keeping an open mind on that when I review that data, in which case we still don't need a monophthong. We just need to, a diphthong. We just need to invoke one of the existing monophthongs and assign it registral features appropriately. The one residual form, the word for drip or overflow, this Revoir form, that seems to belong to a different correspondence, one that or Paleontic supports an R vowel. The Khmer and Vedic suggest an or, a close or vowel for this. So for the moment, I'm just going to assign variants with R and or. And again, let's see how things go when we recompile the Nicobarese data. Okay, so this summarizes what I've just said. I think we can just be happy to do away with the OR placeholder and just have R and U or R and OR for these few examples. And then as we recompile and reanalyze new data, we see how we go. Well, there is another issue which I alluded to, and that is the UR diphthong. Now, for 20 years or so, in fact, I've been harboring suspicions that this UR diphthong was, in fact, all along a kind of phantom. I haven't demonstrated it to my own satisfaction yet, but the more I look at it, the more I think it's going that way. So overall, the evidence for a proto-Austroasiatic UR is remarkably thin. I've only in the 600 word list, I've only in preparation for that, I only found about a dozen good etymologies that really supported an Austroasiatic UR. And in fact, after we applied the criteria for attestation in peripheral branches to be sure that these were old words, that then came down to about 8 words, which you can see here in this table. And to me, that's pretty thin. I would have expected a lot more than 8. Now, just getting my train of thought. Okay, so one thing that I noticed straight away, and you only see it in the top line for number 4 here, but it's in other examples concerning the geographically central languages, and that is that in Old Khmer, in pre-Angkorian, the words that this applies to were always spelt by the scribes with the glyph for the or monophthong. And then it was then transitioned in Angkorian Khmer that they would then write it with the wa, which we interpret as ua. This is very striking, although there are many cases of historical or which are unrelated to this, which turn up as or aor in Middle Khmer due to the Middle Khmer register split. So there's something going on in the case of Khmer where it's confusing to me, yet there's a possibility that either there was a diphthong that was written with the glyph for or in Old Khmer, and then the convention changed, or there was a diphthong, or there wasn't a diphthong, there's something I don't understand. Anyway, I'll be looking at that in more detail. But the other language that seems important to this is Khmu, because for the last couple of years, I've been saying that one of the keys to unlocking Austroasiatic vocalism is looking at reflexes in Khmu, which we generally agree is quite a conservative language phonologically. There's about 80 examples of ur in Sidwell's dictionary, which has about 4,000 entries all up. But when I go through those 80 in detail, I find that the vast majority of them are either loans or expressives, and I've only found these 8 or so words that have any support for being proto-Austroasiatic, and that strikes me as remarkable. Even more remarkable is that they're reflected by monophthongs in the rest of Khmuic, and quite strikingly in Malabari, consistently with the close or vowel. Then we have cognates also with the close or vowel in Proto-Aslian, and you can see my revised Aslian vocalism in the Falus Tribute volume, which is just out, if you want to check the details on that. But also in Palauangic and other branches, the first 6 lines in the table, you can see that there's very strong indication of correspondences between or and ur. So although the last 2 lines of the table are a little ambiguous, it is now my very strong impression that virtually all cases of ur, or what we thought were ur in Proto-Austroasiatic, represent diphthonged monophthongs, in fact, mostly from or, and maybe in some cases from diphthonged a and u. But it seems to be the split of or, and maybe it was a register split of some sort, because I can't find any consistent segmental conditioning, but keeping all options open, and of course we'll be more thoroughly checking the data to see if we can find regular phonological patterns that will really pin down what's happened. So to sum up, the data is incomplete, frustratingly, and often ambiguous. And there are various reasons why we expect to see unexplainable vowel variation, but there are reasons in frequency, distribution, and typology to strongly suspect that the ur vowel is entirely secondary and originates in the breaking of various back vowels, and specifically from the breaking of or in Proto-Austroasiatic. So I expect that there'll be explanations lying in a mix of variation and segmental and suprasegmental features, which will have to be sorted out, and perhaps ultimately this will be done by the younger and sharper minds amongst it, but I'll give it my best shot in the meantime. And that's all I have to present for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul, for that thought-provoking presentation. Well, we have plenty of time for discussion, so the floor is open.
Ryan, you have a question?
Yeah. Hi. Thanks, Paul. Lots to think about for sure. It was reminding me of my work on Katuic, actually, where we have preponderance of these kind of diphthongs and correspondence sets that can't all be, reconstructed to proto-Catuic, so must be splits. And some of the solutions to that seems to come in issues related to conditioning from the coda place of articulation. So I was wondering how much of an effect you're seeing of like the vowels developing differently in, dorsal versus anterior type codas, or open syllables versus not. Because I find that's clarified things in Catuic. So I wonder, and I don't know how old the stuff I see in Catuic is. So anyway, I was just wondering your general thoughts on coda conditioning on the vowels in question.
Thanks, Ryan. No, it's a very good question, because the reason I started to suspect the secondary nature of these back diphthongs a long time ago is because, remember, my early comparative work was in Binaric and Catuic, and very early on I saw that the open R vowel would break and distribute according to the codas, often quite regularly. So, for example, in West Binaric, there's a very strong complementary distribution between R and UR, depending on whether the codas are labial and velar versus dental and palatal, for example. But what always got me for many years was there always seemed to be too few reflexes of sort or reconstructible, and too many diphthongs that I couldn't reconstruct. And it was only lately that I kind of put two and two together. But no, I haven't found any yet correlation with the codas. So that's why I'm starting to think of other explanations other than the simple segmental conditioning. Sorry, my voice is really going.
I'm sorry. The examples currently on the screen are all, closed syllables with sort of anterior places of articulation, except for belly, I guess. Yeah. But anyway, it got me thinking like, oh, that looks like some of the, sets that would suggest a coda place conditioning. But I know this is just a subset of the examples. So.
Yeah. So the thing is, there's a bunch of examples that I didn't put up that don't have peripheral reflexes or at least that I haven't found peripheral reflexes for, but they're in Binaric, Catuic, Camuic, etc., the central languages. And there, and when you put them all together, I don't see the pattern. So I'm still trying to work out how to deal with that. Trying to work out to what extent I can rely on projecting those patterns back or not, if you see what I mean.
Of course, yeah. These can be overlapping and erase older changes. So yeah, it's extremely complex.
But one of the keys is that it seems to correlate with my Aslian vocalism, which I was working on for several years, and I've only just presented in the Falus manuscript and Falus volume, and the Aslian does seem to correlate quite well. And I see Jeffrey's hand is up. Perhaps we could ask Jeffrey his question.
Right. Yeah.
Not a question, just a correction, and which will help your argument. The Temia word, therefore, Thai should be chakod, not chakud. So it's an open O.
Right. If you could just email me a note or something, that would be really handy.
I suspect you got this from Means's dictionary, which is quite slippery. Yeah. Okay.
Mark, you raised a hand.
Yes. So how do we even view diphthongs in proto-Austroasiatic? It seems the matter's been long somewhat uncertain, and while Ia and Ua might have had some weight of evidence, now you're suggesting even Ua the status of Ua is not as strong. I'm going to speak, shortly on the uncertainty of diphthongs as well in Vedic. So it feels like it's an open question of what, if you want to call it a system of diphthongs, just to have Ia and nothing else. It feels odd. So that's all, just this uncertainty of diphthongs in proto-Austroasiatic.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, no, you're right. When I when I did the reconstruction of the Proto-Carsian and Proto-Paleolithic, I was quite struck that in those cases, it looked like the uo was secondary, but it looked like the ear was quite solid, and and so there seems to be an asymmetry. It looks like there's an ear that's quite common across Austroasiatic that can be reconstructed in quite a few words and quite reliably as the favored reflex, and therefore probably the likely proto form. So it could be there was just like one front diphthong in Proto-Austroasiatic. It seems very odd, but I'm just saying this is where the evidence is pointing me at the moment. Yeah.
Right. That's where we are. Okay.
Would you like to read your comment, or would you like me to do it? We have, I don't know if I have the whole thing. Again, from Zinet, in ancient Khmer inscriptions, maybe you can see the same thing, Paul. There are words such as van, kvan, van.
Yeah. So when it comes to the inscriptions, the thing is that there's a sharp divide between pre-Nancowrian and Nancowrian. So before the year 800, all those words are written with the glyph for the close O, and there's absolutely no spellings of a back diphthong, which they use the wa glyph. And then it's only after the year 800, then there's a couple of ambiguous spelling cases, and then they all go to spelling with the wa. And so do we take that as evidence that there was a sound change, or do we take it as evidence that there was some sort of just orthographic change and we kind of don't know what the sound was, right? I mean, I should know better. I should have a better idea of what went on. It's something I discussed with Phil Jenner a few times, so it either there was a sound change and this supports me, or this was just some orthographic convention, and it kind of muddies the waters. Again, still working through that issue.
Fair enough. Are there any more questions or comments? We have, I guess, time for one short one.
Just if any, like for example, Jeffrey had a comment on a particular etymology. If anyone has any commentary on any of the Proto-Austroasiatic reconstructions, please just drop me a line and give me your notes, because it's all extremely valuable. Any observation about data points or decisions I've made or anything, it's all really appreciated.
Great. Okay, well, if not, let's give Paul one last thank you, and perhaps we just take a relatively short break and try to get back on time. I don't know. It's up to whoever's Toby, I think, is the next. So whatever anyone thinks, I'm good with either. So what time should we reconvene? Is